On this unusual day, something was going to happen in seemingly quiet Wuchang. Many soldiers of the Qing government's new army in Hubei province were planning to overthrow the Qing dynasty. Unfortunately, the revolutionaries' list was seized by police officers, and several revolutionaries were arrested on the eve of their uprising. The revolutionaries were wondering whether to launch a preemptive attack or give up their plan. Suddenly, the new army's engineering corps soldiers started to quarrel, followed by several gunshots. Shortly after the disturbance, the Wujong Uprising began. Sun Yat-sen was traveling in the United States. He was thrilled when he learned the Chinese revolutionists seized Wuchang from the newspaper.
Sun Yat-sen spent most of his time developing the revolutionary organization and raising funds overseas. So, Sun wasn't informed of the Wuchang Uprising beforehand.
Sun Yat-sen, the most important leader of Chinese revolution during the late Qing dynasty, was aware of the progress of revolution everywhere in China. In 1894, he founded the first Chinese revolutionary group, the Revived China Society in Honolulu, pledging to drive out the Manchurians and establish a united government for China. Sun traveled extensively overseas to develop his revolution capabilities. He learned the concept of united government from the United States independence revolution and political system. In the late 19th century, China was colonized by Western powers. As a result, nationalism spread across China. In the early 20th century, many Chinese students studied in foreign countries. They were disappointed because the Qing government was unable to defend the nation's sovereignty. As a result, revolutionary groups were founded one after another.
People blame the Qing government because the government was unable to resist the Western powers. Thus, more and more people resorted to revolution.
In an effort to unify revolutionary forces, the Revived China Society founded the Chinese Revolutionary Alliance in cooperation with other revolutionary groups in Tokyo in 1905, pledging to drive out the Manchurians, recover Han China, create a republic, and equalize land ownership. After this, more and more people urged the Qing government to step down from power. Many secret societies and new army soldiers launched uprisings one after another. Actually, many intellectuals had urged the Qing government to reform its system peacefully using tangible measures before revolutionary groups instigated uprisings.
Sun Yat-sen was the leader of the revolution. Liang Qichao was the most prominent intellectual urging peaceful reform. Sun headed the revolution, and Liang was the leading constitutionalist.
Liang Qichao inherited political thoughts from Kang Youwei. They both advocated constitutional monarchy and urged the Qing government to establish a Congress and cabinet. In 1906, the Qing government announced a constitutional preparation program. In 1909 and 1910, it established provincial consultative boards and an advisory committee in the central government. However, the constitutionalists were extremely disappointed when the Qing government announced the Royal Cabinet member list in May 1911. Out of desperation, most constitutionalists began to support revolution. In the same year, the Qing government confiscated 2 railways built by private companies with no compensation whatsoever. Irritated by the nationalization, local gentlemen demanded the government return the railways. In Sichuan, people protested the nationalization vigorously. In September 1911, the Qing government dispatched the Hubei New Army to squelch the riots in Sichuan. 7,500 soldiers were transferred to Sichuan. It was the best timing for uprising in Hubei. At that time, many people in central China echoed revolution. It was because after several unsuccessful uprisings in southern China, Song Jiaoren and Chen Qimei, the leading figures of the Chinese Revolutionary Alliance, decided to instigate uprisings in the liberal Yangtze River region.
There were many revolutionary groups in central China. In this region, probably the most groups were in Wuhan, Hubei province. Zhang Zhidong trained many experts in Hubei using new education programs. Later on, some of the experts continued their education in Japan. They brought back lots of new thoughts to China and acted as the core members for the revolution.
The Gongjin and Wenxue associations were the leading revolutionary groups in Hubei. Both associations had developed progressively in the new army. Tan Renfeng of the Chinese Revolutionary Alliance arranged for both associations to launch an uprising in the autumn of 1911. In Wuhan, as many as 2/3 of the new army soldiers had joined the revolutionaries. They were ready to join the uprising. Huang Xing of the Chinese Revolutionary Alliance was aware of the favorable climate for revolution in Hubei. On October 5th, he wrote a letter to Comrade Feng Ziyu, saying, "Now the Qing government has confiscated railways. Our comrades are ready to revolt against the ruler." 5 days later, the Wujong Uprising broke out. This building, sited on the Russian concession of Hankou, was where the Gongjin Association was located. On October 9, 1911, a bomb exploded by accident in this building. The concession police officers searched the whole place and seized the revolutionaries' flags, seals, and list. In the evening, several revolutionaries, including Peng Chufan, Liu Fuqi, and Yang Hongsheng, were arrested, and curfew was announced for the whole of Wuchang. On the next day, October 10th, Reichun, Viceroy of Huguang, ordered Peng, Liu, and Yang to be executed publicly. Then, Reichun searched the new army barracks for revolutionaries. The cruel execution sent a warning to the revolutionaries. Xiong Bingquan, a squad leader of the new army's engineering corps, handed ammunition to comrades for the forthcoming revolt.
My father decided to launch a revolt that night. Cai Jimin, a new army officer, immediately promised to join the uprising. In the evening, platoon leader Tao Qisheng saw soldier Jin Zhaolong cleaning his rifle. He thought Jin was going to do something rash and started to scold him. Tao and Jin argued with each other and exchanged blows. Another soldier, Chen Zhengying, shot Tao Qisheng in the buttocks.
The unexpected riot caused Xiong Bingquan to launch an attack at once. He led his comrades out of their camp, firing 3 shots to the sky as the signal of uprising. Pretty soon, they were joined by fellow revolutionaries, making their way to Chuwangtai in southern Wuchang. Chuwangtai was where the Hubei New Army's armory was located. On the evening of October 10th, thousands of revolutionary soldiers gathered here. Interim Commander Wu Zhaolin handed the revolutionaries ammunition from the armory. The revolutionaries tied a piece of white cloth on their left arms as identification, charging to the Viceroy's yamen from 3 directions. Meanwhile, the Revolutionary Artillery Division made its way into Wuchang, all the way to the top of Serpent Hill.
As soon as the artillery division reached the top of Serpent Hill, a division aimed all guns at the Viceroy's Yamen and Hubei New Army's command headquarters and opened fire immediately. On October 11th, before daybreak, the city of Wuchang was dark. Merchants set fire to their stores nearby the Viceroy's Yamen. The fire guided the revolutionaries to aim their guns at the Yamen, which they hit accurately.
The gunfire forced Viceroy Ruichun to flee from Wuchang. The revolutionaries took over the Yamen before daybreak. It was the first triumph of the 1911 revolution. This building, now called the Memorial Hall of the Wujong Uprising, was where the Hubei Provincial Consultative Board had been located. On October 11th, the Hubei military government of the Republic of China was founded in this building, using the 18-star flag of the Gongjin Association as the national flag. Meanwhile, the military government declared that it would terminate the era name of the Shentong Emperor and reinstate the era of the Yellow Emperor. The uprising, led by low-ranking officers and soldiers, turned out to be a success. Nevertheless, they needed a reputable leader to calm down the situation. Li Yuanhong, a new army brigadier without any connection to the revolution, was forced to be the military governor of Hubei. On October 12th, the military government's troops occupied Hanyang and Hankou. All the three boroughs of Wuhan were seized by revolutionaries. Sun Yat-sen was in the United States when he heard about the success of the Wujong Uprising. Sun did not return to China immediately. Instead, he went to Europe and lobbied the Western powers for their support. On October 14, 1911, the Denver Post reported Sun Yat-sen's journey to Europe in its headline news: "Revolutionaries' leader starts hurriedly for the east from this city." Sun left New York for London by boat. Military advisor Homer Lee arranged appointments for Sun to call on high-ranking British officers.
While in London, Sun Yat-sen urged the British government to terminate the deportation order which prevented him from entering Hong Kong and to stop giving loans to the Qing government.
Sun Yat-sen left London for Paris. Then he headed for Asia via the Mediterranean. After a month-long voyage, Sun finally returned to China on December 25th. Making his home in the countryside and fishing all day long, Yuan Shikai acted like a hermit. That's how Yuan spent his days in his hometown after 1909. He publicized these photos in newspapers, misleading the public that he had lost interest in politics. Yuan Shikai was a powerful general and politician during the late Qing dynasty. In 1895, he was appointed to train the modernized new army in Tianjin. Yuan's army, also known as the Beiyang Army, was not only the armed force of the Qing government, but the source of Yuan's political influence. In 1908, Puyi, the Shentong Emperor, was installed. Despised by the Prince Regent Zaifeng, Puyi's father, Yuan was forced to step down from power. According to historical records collected by the National Palace Museum, shortly after revolutionaries seized Wuhan in 1911, the Qing government ordered the Beiyang Army to quell the uprising. However, the Beiyang Army's high-ranking officials obeyed Yuan Shikai only, including Feng Guozhang and Duan Qirui. the desperate Qing government turned to Yuan for help and offered him the position of Viceroy of Huguang. Finally, Yuan accepted the Qing government's offer. He proceeded to Hubei immediately. At that time, many vassals urged the Qing government to remove the prime minister.
The Qing government needed Yuan Shikai's help desperately, and thus appointed him prime minister instead of the viceroy.
Yuan Shikai accepted the appointment and returned to Beijing. In his capacity of prime minister, he began to deploy the armed forces for civil war. In Wuhan, the Hubei military government, founded by the revolutionaries, had calmed the local situation and spared no effort to protect the lives and properties of foreign consulates in Hankou. Thus, Western powers agreed not to interfere with the uprisings, allowing the military government to deal with the Qing Imperial Army calmly. The Battle of Yangsha, a critical part of the 1911 revolution, broke out in Hanyang and Hankou. The battle erupted on October 18th. On October 28th, Huang Xing arrived in Wuhan hastily. Li Yuanhong appointed Huang to command the revolutionaries. The revolutionaries and Imperial Army engaged at the Beijing-Hankou Railway. The revolutionaries were made of militia. Short on combat training and arms, they were unable to withstand the attacks launched by the Imperial Army. The Qing Imperial Navy commander, Sa Junbing, ordered the fleet to fire from the Yangtze River, forcing the revolutionaries to retreat. They withdrew all the way to Hankou, continuing to fight the Imperial Army in the streets. Hankou was the commercial district of Wuhan. The Western powers occupied Hankou's riverside areas as concessions. The concessions were protected by ditches, barriers, and soldiers. The Imperial Army and revolutionaries kept away from the concessions when they were fighting in Hankou. The Qing Army commander Feng Guozhang ordered his soldiers to set fire to Hankou. On November 1st, the revolutionaries retreated to Hanyang.
The blaze forced the revolutionaries to withdraw to Hanyang. Later on, the revolutionaries counterattacked Hankou's Imperial Army from two directions. One group crossed the Han River, and the other group crossed the Yangtze River to attack the Imperial Army. But the counterattack failed.
Huang Xing was trapped in Hanyang and unable to fight back. The Imperial Army commander sent 30,000 soldiers to attack Huang. On November 27th, the revolutionaries lost Hanyang. Prior to retreating, they burned down Guiyuan Temple, which had been used as a granary. The military government called a meeting. Huang Xing urged the military government to give up Wuchang and join the revolutionaries in Jiangsu and Zhejiang to attack Nanjing. This opinion was rejected. Huang Xing was extremely disappointed. He left for Shanghai immediately. The Qing Imperial Army took over Hankou and Hanyang. Nonetheless, they were not planning to attack Wuchang. In the midst of tensions between the revolutionaries and Imperial Army, the Red Cross and churches were tending to the wounded soldiers, civilians, and corpses. Yuan Shikai proposed a peace talk. British Consul General Herbert Gough mediated between the revolutionaries and the Imperial Army. Finally, a ceasefire agreement was signed on December 1st, thus ending the Battle of Yangsha. The revolutionaries were unable to defeat the Qing Imperial Army. Nonetheless, they took over Wuhan for 40 days, allowing the constitutionalists and other revolutionaries sufficient time to prepare themselves for the revolution.
The last available armed troops of the Qing government's Beiyang army were trapped in Wuhan, allowing other provinces to declare independence and join the revolution. This is why the Battle of Yangsha was considered a turning point in the revolution. The Wujong Uprising was instigated by revolutionaries, followed by actions taken by the Consultative Board. Then, other provinces declared independence.
As a result, as many as 10 provinces in southern China declared independence, and many generals of Beijing's new army, such as Wu Luzhan, Zhang Xiaozeng, and Lan Tianwei, were inspired by the success of the Wujong Uprising and prepared themselves for revolution. Unfortunately, Wu Luzhan was assassinated. The military coup d'etat did not come true. In November, the Qing Imperial Navy betrayed the government and backed away from Wuhan. And the Imperial Navy's battleships assisted the revolutionaries to attack Nanjing. On December 2nd, the revolutionaries recovered Nanjing. Henceforth, Shanxi, Shanxi, and other provinces to the south of the Yangtze River were controlled by the revolutionaries. The revolutionaries were stronger than before. As a result, all independent provinces began to think about the possibility of a provisional government. On November 7th, Li Yuanhong contacted all independent provinces, asking them to meet him in Wuhan to discuss how to establish a provisional government. But the three military governors of Jiangsu and Zhejiang, Cheng Duquan, Tang Shouqian, and Chen Qimei, insisted the provisional government be established in Shanghai and headed by Huang Xing.
The independent provinces were divided regarding the candidates for provisional government leader. Some military governors nominated Li Yuanhong, while others preferred Huang Xing.
The Military Governors Federation was established on November 15th in Shanghai. However, the Wuhan and Shanghai factions disagreed with each other all the time. The Wuhan faction refused to compromise. On November 30th, all military governors' delegates gathered in the British concession of Hankou, and then on December 3rd, they passed the Code of Provisional Government Organization to serve as the legal basis for the election of a provisional president. Yuan Shikai had the best chance to serve as provisional president. Ironically, Yuan squelched the revolutionaries taking part in the revolts. Shortly after the Battle of Yangsha broke out, Huang Xing wrote to Yuan, asking him to join the revolutionaries and overthrow the Qing government. Yuan Shikai, the most influential warlord in northern China, was the last hope for the southern revolutionaries. What was his next move? In the 1880s, Yuan Shikai joined the Qing Imperial Army and served the Qing government for many years. He took advantage of the troubled Qing government and knew he would lose his life once the revolution came to an end.
The revolutionaries wanted to kill Yuan Shikai. The Qing government didn't trust him either. I believe Yuan was actually hesitant about what he wanted to do next. He wasn't confident at all. To him, there were many factors beyond his control. At the time, Yuan Shikai's strategy was to attack the revolutionaries by using the Qing Imperial Army. Meanwhile, he used the threat of the revolutionaries to pressure the Qing government to increase his power.
Yuan Shikai needed to communicate with the southern independent provinces through a proper channel. At this time, the Qing government released Wang Jingwei, who had been imprisoned after attempting to assassinate Prince Regent Zaifeng. Yuan contacted the revolutionaries through Wang. The revolutionaries promised to offer Yuan the position of president if he would betray the Qing government. Upon learning the Qing Imperial Army's plan to attack Wuchang, Yuan immediately urged the troops to stop the attack. Meanwhile, through the British, he arranged a ceasefire between the Imperial Army and the revolutionaries. Beijing's Dongjiaomin Alley was the legation quarter during the late Qing dynasty. At that time, the British were the most influential of the Western powers in China. The foreign envoys in Beijing, headed by British envoy John Jordan, declared support for Yuan Shikai as soon as they heard Yuan had been appointed prime minister.
The British government hoped that China would restore order. Actually, it didn't care at all whether China continued its monarchy or switched to a democracy. Now, most historians believe that the British government wanted to see a strongman appear to calm down the situation in China. Yuan Shikai was considered to be a strongman by the British envoy John Jordan.
Many revolutionaries knew they were unable to defeat Yuan Shikai. Therefore, they were planning to compromise with Yuan instead of fight with him.
Yuan Shikai was a Han, same as the revolutionaries. They wanted to see a Han regime in China.
Constitutionalist leaders such as Zhang Jian and Liang Qichao had known Yuan Shikai for a long time and didn't want the revolutionaries to take all the power. Therefore, the Constitutionalists wanted to see a republic headed by Yuan. Apparently, southern and northern China agreed to discuss a peaceful resolution. On December 18, 1911, southern and northern China began to discuss peaceful resolution in the Municipal Council Hall of Shanghai International Settlement. Wu Tingfang represented the southern independent provinces, and Tang Xiaoyi represented the northern Qing government. Tang Xiaoyi, a native of Guangdong province, was inclined toward republican democracy. He wanted to be appointed the first prime minister if Yuan Shikai became the president of China.
Tang Xiaoyi, a graduate of Columbia University, was a supporter of the democratic system. Apparently, Yuan Shikai was ready to accept republican democracy. That's why he sent Tang to represent the Qing government.
In the seemingly peaceful conference room, both parties were striving for their best interests. Besides Wang Jingwei, who continued to negotiate with Yuan Keding and Yang Du, Zhao Fengchang, a celebrity living in Shanghai, was another key figure in the discussions. Zhao was the staff of Zhang Zhidong, a reputable vassal during the late Qing dynasty. He communicated with the constitutionalists and revolutionaries constantly. While in Shanghai, through Zhao Fengchang, Tang Shaoyi often invited Zhang Jian, Huang Xing, and Wu Tingfang to Zhao's residence for negotiation.
Many under-the-table negotiations were concluded at Zhao Fengchang's residence. Sun Yat-sen and Huang Xing were informed of the negotiations.
Among the personal correspondences of Zhao Fengchang, there were many documents drafted by both parties in Zhao's residence, such as the preliminary conclusions about the peace negotiation, and the draft of cabinet member list. Most of these documents became official documents. There is no doubt that Zhao Fengchang played a vital role in the peace negotiation. The peace negotiation dealt with political terms and conditions. However, the armed forces played an important role for the changeover of political power. On the second day of peace negotiations, Yuan Shikai's secret emissary Liao Yuchun met Huang Xing's representative Gu Zhongchen in Shanghai. They agreed to adopt a democratic system and treat the Qing royal family favorably. They also agreed that whoever overthrew the Qing government would serve as the president. Both representatives signed the agreement. This agreement finalized the southern and northern forces' intention to overthrow the Qing government and should have been able to promote peace negotiation. But then Sun Yat-sen showed up in Shanghai on December 25th, which made the negotiation unpredictable. In 1896, Sun Yat-sen was kidnapped in London. He developed his revolutionary career overseas for a long time and was considered a leader of the Chinese Revolution. When Sun arrived in China at the end of 1911, it helped the revolutionaries' Wuhan and Shanghai factions settle their disputes. On December 29, 1911, Sun Yat-sen was elected the first provisional president of the Republic of China. The southern independent provinces elected him president without consulting Yuan Shikai, which irritated Yuan. He blamed Representative Tang Shaoyi for acting beyond his authorization, ordered Tang to resign, and denied the terms and conditions agreed to earlier by Yuan. Sun Yat-sen knew the provisional government faced a number of issues, such as divided opinions and financial difficulties. Most importantly, the revolutionary troops were made up of inexperienced civilians and unable to overthrow the Qing government. Huang Xing wrote a letter to Yuan Shuxuan, a native of his hometown, asking for financial assistance. The letter justified the financial difficulties faced by the revolutionaries. The newly founded Republic of China was not recognized by any nation yet. Sun Yat-sen knew he had to cooperate with Yuan Shikai for the success of the Republic.
Sun Yat-sen said to Hu Hanmin, "I cannot trust Yuan Shikai. However, I want to make use of him. It's better to have Yuan defeat the Qing government than trying to overthrow it by ourselves." That's what Sun said.
Sun Yat-sen sent a telegram to Yuan Shikai, saying he served as the provisional president for the time being, and promised to recommend Yuan as the next president if Yuan adopted a democratic system and ended the Qing government. In Chinese history, there were many influential vassals fighting for power. Ironically, the history repeated itself in the late years of the Qing dynasty. Yuan Shikai was appointed prime minister to squelch the revolutionaries for the emperor. Now, he demanded the royal family surrender territory in exchange for favorable terms offered by the republic. Faced with a tough proposal, Empress Dowager Longyu had a hard time making up her mind. The Manchurian nobles were divided in their opinions. Yi Kuang, an old pro-Yuan prince, suggested Longyu hand over power. Other young princes, such as Liang Bi and Zai Tao, took a tough stance, rejecting the democratic system resolutely. They were planning to assassinate Yuan Shikai and fight the revolutionaries. The revolutionaries often resorted to assassination in order to solve disagreements.
Yuan Shikai escaped an assassination attempt. A few days later, Peng Jiajun assassinated Prince Liang Bi. Liang Bi was known for his tough stance against the revolutionaries. He died 2 days after the assassination. Liang Bi's death discouraged other tough princes among the Manchurian nobles.
On January 26th, 47 generals, including Duan Qirui, sent a telegram saying, "Adopt the democratic system to stabilize the royal family." The Qing government was shocked.
So many generals had chosen the democratic system. How could the Qing government fight the revolutionaries?
Manchurian nobles were frightened by the repeated assassinations and discouraged by the betrayed generals. No one objected to the Shentong Emperor's abdication after this. The Forbidden City of Beijing signified the power of the Qing government. On February 12, 1912, Empress Dowager Longyu announced the imperial edict of the Shentong Emperor's abdication. This officially ended the Qing government's 268-year reign in China. The imperial edict was allegedly prepared by Zhang Jin. The paragraph, "The emperor hereby delivers his ruling power to the constitutional republic," ended the 2,133-year-long monarchy beginning from 221 BC, the year China was unified under Qin Shi Huang's rule. The edict was unprecedented in Chinese history. The edict also states, Yuan Shikai is hereby fully authorized to organize a provisional government in cooperation with the revolutionary troops, which meant the Qing government had no intention to recognize Sun Yat-sen's provisional government. This paragraph also served as the legitimate basis for Yuan to rule the nation. Some scholars believe that this paragraph was added by Yuan himself. That's why there were so many disputes between Yuan, the Qing government, and Sun's provisional government regarding the inheritance of political power.
From Yuan Shikai's standpoint, he could claim he gained the power from the Qing emperor, not from Sun Yat-sen's provisional government.
Monarchy had come to an end after the founding of the republic. However, Puyi, the last emperor, still resided in the Forbidden City, receiving $4 million from the Republic each year. The Republic of China treated Puyi in the same way as a foreign emperor. This is the Shanghai Railway Museum, rebuilt on the same location of the Shanghai Railway Station, built during the late Qing dynasty. On January 1st, 1912, the first day of the Republic of China. At 10 a.m., the Shanghai revolutionary troops gathered at the station with 5-color flags tied to their bayonets. Sun Yat-sen, the new provisional president, was in his military uniform and accompanied by his entourage, including Hu Hanmin, the military governor of Guangdong. Sun was leaving for Nanjing by train for his inauguration ceremony. The train arrived at Nanjing at 5 p.m. Sun and his entourage were welcomed by the crowds and thousands of flags. Gun salutes to pay their respect to the president. The president's fleet passed through Nanjing and arrived at the office of the provisional president, which had served as the viceroy's yamen before. In the evening, Sun Yat-sen, the 46-year-old president, was inaugurated in a ceremony attended by hundreds of guests in the office of the provisional president. At this moment, Asia's first republic was born. In the beginning of the 20th century, there were just a handful of republics in the world. An old country like China was transformed into a republic. Naturally, the whole world was astonished. Hu Shi, who was studying in the United States in 1912, kept a political cartoon called The Family of Republics in his diary. In this cartoon, the senior democratic nations, such as the United States, France, and Switzerland, were grandpas. Brazil and Portugal, who had become republics in the last 30 years, were youngsters. The newly founded Republic of China was the child shown in the cartoon. On July 16, 1912, a Shanghai pictorial reprinted this cartoon. The cartoon was modified tremendously. The cartoonist portrayed a Boy Scout who represented the Republic of China. This symbolized the Chinese expectations for their future. Reform was the only way for an old empire to regain its energy. Sun Yat-sen served as president for just 3 months. During his short presidency, Sun continued to negotiate with Yuan Shikai regarding the Qing emperor's abdication. In addition, he announced a number of decrees to reform society. Sun adopted the Western calendar for the Republic of China. Secondly, he promoted equality among nationals. Thirdly, government officials were considered civil servants, not masters anymore. Furthermore, the classification of untouchables was abolished. Women were prohibited from binding their feet. These measures not only allowed China to catch up with world trends, but enhanced equality between men and women. Nonetheless, how to eliminate the distinction between Hans and Manchurians was a tough task for the provisional government. The revolutionaries instigated opposition using the racial hatred between the Hans and Manchurians. After the Wujong Uprising, many military leaders, including Li Yuanhong, cut off their braids to show their support for the Republic. Civilians were also ordered to cut off their braids.
Revolutionary troops in every independent province patrolled the streets, cutting off the braids of passers-by. It was very common. In March 1912, the provisional government issued the braid-cutting order. Many Western-style barbershops were opened in big cities like Shanghai. People saw braid-cutting cartoons in the newspapers. In this cartoon, a revolutionary grabbed a conservative's braid and cut it off. In the Republic, the braids reminded people of the negative and backward Qing government. Therefore, the braids signified the change of political power. After the last emperor abdicated his power, Sun Yat-sen led his officials to the mausoleum of the Ming Dynasty Hongwu Emperor and reported the good news of recovering the Han's territory to the emperor's spirit. But after the Republic was established, the slogan, "Drive out the Manchurians," was outdated. The differences between all races of the Republic had to be reconciled as soon as possible. The alliance formed between the Manchurians and Mongolians served as the basis for the Qing government to rule China. Sun Yat-sen knew that the revolutionaries could no longer reject the Manchurians. Otherwise, Manchuria and Mongolia would be forced to declare their independence. Actually, the Western powers were encouraging Manchuria and Mongolia to announce independence. In a big country like China, all races had to be unified for their interests. Racial issues were harmful to the nation. In his declaration of office, Sun Yat-sen pointed out the concept of 5 races under one union, serving as the guideline for the Republic's racial policy. Therefore, all provinces chose the 5-color flag as the national flag on January 10, 1912, and urged President Sun to promulgate the national flag. However, Sun did not approve the resolution. Instead, he preferred the blue sky, white sun, and a holy red earth flag, similar to the flag of the Chinese Revolutionary Alliance. In 1895, Lu Haodong designed the blue sky with a white sun flag. In 1906, Sun Yat-sen modified Lu's flag and added the holy red earth. Eventually, the blue sky, white sun, and a holy red earth flag was used as the military flag of the Navy. When the national government unified the whole of China in 1928, the blue sky, white sun, and a holy red earth flag officially became the national flag of the Republic of China. On January 28, 1912, the Provisional Senate was established in Nanjing. After the Qing Emperor abdicated his power, President Sun Yat-sen abided by his promise to Yuan Shikai, resigning his office. On February 15th, the Senate elected Yuan the second provisional president of the Republic of China. In early March, a French pictorial publicized a cartoon showing Yuan Shikai's braids being cut off. This cartoon indicated that Yuan supported the Republic. Sun Yat-sen hoped Yuan would be inaugurated in Nanjing. He sent his special envoy Cai Yuanpei to escort Yuan from Beijing to Nanjing. However, a military coup d'etat occurred in Beijing on February 29th. Yuan refused to go to Nanjing, saying he had to calm the tension. Yuan was inaugurated in Beijing on March 10th. On the following day, the Provisional Constitution of the Republic of China, drafted by the Senate, was promulgated. The Provisional Constitution stipulated for a parliamentary system to prevent Yuan Shikai from becoming a dictator and to create a responsible cabinet for the country.
After Yuan was elected the second president, the Senate authorized Sun Yat-sen to act as president before the cabinet was organized. Yuan Shakai appointed Tang Xiaoyi as prime minister. On March 29th, the Senate passed the cabinet list submitted by Tang Xiaoyi. Some constitutionalists and revolutionaries were appointed cabinet ministers. However, the majority of cabinet ministers were Yuan's staff members. On April 1st, Sun Yat-sen handed over his presidency to Yuan, leaving the office of the provisional president. On the following day, the Senate passed a resolution to move the provisional government to Beijing. The republic was officially unified. In retrospect, what is the significance of the 1911 revolution?
At that time, revolution was a popular topic in the world. Whoever was unsatisfied with the status quo blamed the monarchy. China was a huge empire, occupying an area larger than 10 million square kilometers. In such a vast environment as this, the revolutionaries took just 80 days to establish the first republic in Asia. And not only this, the first Chinese democracy. So we can't deny that the revolutionaries accomplished all of this quickly, at minimal cost. Most importantly, after the 1911 revolution, there was no longer an emperor in China. The Chinese used to believe in the mandate of heaven. After the 1911 revolution, however, people believed that they themselves were the masters of their nation. According to Sun Yat-sen, a republic belonged to the people and was created for the people. The dream of democracy shared by Sun and other revolutionaries came true after the 1911 revolution, and the Republic of China's touching history began to unfold.